Top of the morning to you. Welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Thank you for joining us. It's 556 days into this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and Russia launched attacks against Ukrainian fuel storage facilities, while Ukrainian forces continue to strike Russian military targets, and that's according to official briefings of the two countries. According to the Russian Defense Ministries, Moscow carried out a group drone strike on fuel storage facilities used to supply military vehicles of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Odessa region and hit all the designated targets. The Russian military have conducted strikes on Ukrainian military personnel and equipment such as armored vehicles and artillery in the directions of Kupiansk, Krasny Liman, and Donetsk. On the other hand, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces issued a report saying in the previous 24 hours, 25 battles took place along the front line. Multiple locations in Ukraine have been targeted by artillery and missile strikes from the Russian military. The Ukrainian Air Force, missile and artillery units hit Russian concentration areas of manpower and equipment, Russian artillery, and other targets. Meanwhile, in the early hours of today, Russia's air defense systems repelled a Ukrainian drone attack in the Kursk region, which is home to a large nuclear plant, and over the Black Sea near Crimea. Now, the Defense Ministry said in a brief statement on Telegram today, in their words, at about 1 a.m. Moscow time, an attempt by the Kiev regime to carry out a terrorist attack by two armored aircraft type UAVs on objects in the Russian Federation was thwarted. It added one of the drones was destroyed in the air over the Black Sea near the Crimean Peninsula, and the other was shot down somewhere over the territory of Kursk region with no casualties or damage reported on the ground. Meanwhile, the military did not elaborate on where exactly the drones were intercepted. Several witnesses reported hearing air defense fire in the city of Kurchatov. In the meantime, Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed 4 Ukrainian military boats carrying about a number of troops were destroyed by Russian aircraft in the Black Sea overnight. In a Telegram post, the ministry claimed the 4 U.S.-made Willard Sea Force boats were intercepted while they were heading towards Cape Tarkaret on Crimea's northwest coast. However, there was no immediate comment from Ukraine. Ukrainian attacks on the occupied Crimean Peninsula have ramped up in recent weeks, with Russia claiming to have thwarted a number of attempted assaults. And Ukrainian forces claim that Russian forces launched massive drone attack on Ukraine's Danube River area for the second straight night, just hours before Russia's president is scheduled to meet with his Turkish counterpart to discuss reviving the vital Black Sea grain deal. Ukraine's Southern Defense Forces said it shot down 17 drones, but the attack in the Odessa region had damaged multiple targets, including warehouses and agricultural equipment. A statement on Telegram partly reads, "The enemy has again defiantly and powerfully attacked the south of Odessa region. A massive overnight attack by Shahed 136 unmanned aerial vehicles targeted civilian infrastructure in the Danube area. There were no reports of casualties." Ole Kipper, the head of the Odessa Region Military Administration, reported damage in Ismail district, home to one of Ukraine's main Danube ports. It comes a day after Russia launched a drone attack on the Danube port of Reni that killed 2 people. As we reported earlier, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is due to meet his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir Putin, in Russia's southern resort city of Sochi today, primarily to discuss Black Sea grain exports. According to Turkish officials, the two leaders will discuss the fallout from Russia's military intervention in Ukraine, as well as a deal that allowed the export of Ukrainian grain via the Black Sea. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in Moscow last week to discuss grain ahead of the Erdogan meeting. Mr. Shoigu said it was not Russia's fault that the grain deal had failed and repeated the Russian position that Moscow will return to it if all the promises made to Russia were fulfilled. The Black Sea grain deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations in 2022 ended after Russia withdrew in July. Moscow has since launched frequent attacks on Ukrainian ports in the Danube River, which has since become Ukraine's major route for exporting grain. However, Ankara and the United Nations are now seeking to convince Moscow to return to the agreement. Now let's talk to Mr. Tony Agwans, Senior Lecturer, Anglo-Ruskin University, who joins us virtually from London in the UK. A very good morning to you and a warm welcome to the program.
Good morning, Olamide. Good to be on your program this morning.
It's good to have you, Olumide. It is Mr. Agwans. But let's go straight right off the bat to the counteroffensive and the conflict. You've been reporting this morning offensives and counteroffensives. You've been reporting drone attacks. You've been reporting the repelling of attacks by Russia of Ukraine and vice versa. We've been told that Ukraine is making advancements in the southern part of the country, the southern part of the country. Russia is trying to defend those positions, and Russia is trying to make incursions into the eastern part of the country. Ukraine is trying to defend those positions. So it seems there is some sort of gains made on either side. To which degree we do not know, because it depends on the propaganda both sides are spewing. What at this point of the war do you think, where do you think we are at this point? Is it a stalemate, as has been previously analyzed, or is Ukraine making slow but steady progress?
Yeah, thank you, Olumide, for that question and for your robust intro before you brought me in. When you look at the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and like you said, we are getting close to the 560-day, mark. It's a case of kind of deja vu now, because even military experts, everyone, diplomats, international relations, czars, everyone is at a confusion point as to what actually is happening. There seems not to be any headway. Neither side is making any gains, and there has not been any inroad as far as diplomacy is concerned and negotiations. Nothing is happening. But going straight to your question, even this week, the week just passed, the American and Ukrainian officials did admit that the summer offensive that was very much heralded has not yielded much result as they would expect. So both Ukrainian and US and even NATO officials, military officials, have said that the counter-offensive has been slow, especially when you look at the Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. There's been a really slow offensive from the Ukrainians. But however, there have been some pushback. The Ukrainians officials have said they've been able to push back some Russian corridors along that eastern axis. But like you said, things are just at a standstill at the moment.
Ukraine needed a wartime president when President Volodymyr Zelensky was elected as president of Ukraine, though he couldn't have known it at the time that he will become a wartime president. Now that he seems to be living up to expectations of demonstrating to the world the veracity of the Ukrainian spirit, their tenacity, their doggedness, and their resilience. He's been taking a few decisions to clean up the public image of Ukraine, previously dampened or stained by reports of corruption in Ukraine, going as far as the Burisma scandal involving the President of the United States' son, Hunter Biden, and even now, situations of alleged fraud involved in the enlistments and the drafting of men into the Ukrainian army. Now we understand that the defense minister is to be changed. The reasons given was not specific, but also aside from that, also a fraud allegation involving a Ukrainian oligarch who was said to have supported President Zelensky, but now a warrant has been issued for his arrest. A Ukrainian billionaire who owns one of the top TV stations in Ukraine, who is to be arrested. So President Zelensky seems to be cleaning house. Is he indeed cleaning house?
Absolutely, he is. Like you said just now, the defense minister, Alexei Reznikov, is been shoved aside. And as you would expect, President Zelensky has said they need a new approach. The war is 19 months and all that. And let's not forget, despite all the fraud allegations, the scandals, these things are bound to happen. Because when we talk of corruption within military hierarchies, political elite, military contractors, these things will definitely happen. If we look back, the same thing has even happened within the Russian military some months back. So I think it's the turn of the Ukrainians. So these changes are very, very much expected. For me, I think the slow pace of the counteroffensive may even be the major reason why President Zelensky is bringing in a new defense chief. So that may be the reason. But the scandal has not also done Alexei Reznikov any good. There've been a lot of backhand deals going on, although he has not been specifically fingered as actually being responsible, but he is the person in charge. So to be candid, I think President Zelensky, when you look at him, a comedian without political experience, I think the way he has handled this crisis, he has actually behaved like a statesman. And I think Ukrainians are very, very, they are pleased with him, they are happy with him, and he's handled himself very well. So hopefully, when the new defense chief comes in, there might be some new approach, some new strategy as far as the procurement and execution of this war is concerned. So that is the hope of the Ukrainian people, and it's the hope of the West, who have been supporting the Ukrainians to the hilt since the crisis began 19 months ago.
You said he's handled himself as a statesman, and that seems to be the case. But there have been analysis to the effect that, yes, a statesman he has been, and indeed he is. But as far as mediation goes, as far as towing a middle path, as far as reconciliation goes, as far as ending the war, he is in a very straitjacketed position, yielding neither to the right nor the left, as is President Putin. But President Putin has accused Ukraine of not wanting to come to the negotiating table. It's been said, is it for lack of experience or want of experience that President Zelensky, a very young man in this very powerful position, has not been more circumspect, even though he's defending territorial integrity of Ukraine, which he must and he is. Is there no case for leaving a door open for negotiations? It seems he doesn't want to hear the name of Vladimir Putin as far as that is concerned until the Russian troops evacuate Ukraine and leave the occupied territory.
Yeah, I think when you look at the genesis of this whole crisis, NATO membership, Russia not wanting the West and NATO to be near its borders, and rightly so, they may be justified in their reasons. And then you look at the Ukrainian side, not wanting another nation to determine the kind of association and friendship and relationship they keep, then you also feel for them. Yes, we may think that because of the relative inexperience diplomatically of President Zelensky, he could have done some things differently and probably giving some, leeway to some Russian demands and requests and averted this war. But then, when you also look at it, Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and they should be able to determine the kind of, regional groupings or military alliance they can join. But again, in the context of the world geopolitical and economic order, you will agree with me that there's a lot of, politics going on between Russia, the United States, especially, that is the undertone, responsible for all this. So, and that is where analysts like us have always said that in situations like this, probably the United Nations could do more. But like it has always been, even when Iraq was invaded by the US in the early 90s, the UN have come out to be an organization that is more or less a toothless bulldog. They are just there, they back, but they don't bite. So it's so unfortunate, and I don't envy President Zelensky at all. He's in a very tight corner.
Indeed, and that corner he's in was made worse by the expiration of the Black Sea grain deal. All roads lead to Sochi for the resuscitation of that deal, if it does happen, as President Putin and President Erdogan of Turkey meet to discuss the conditions for Russia to kickstart it once again. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the outcome?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. The Turkish President Erdogan, he's got the magic wand. He's done it before. And I believe that a deal will be struck. Let's not forget, since July 17th, Russia refused to sign the new deal after signing on three occasions. And I think also Russia demand should also be looked into. There's a lot of restrictions on their own export of fertilizers and grains. So it's a kind of 50-50. Erdogan, we're talking of experience. He's very experienced in these matters. He's been there, so he knows what to do. He will say the right things. And I believe the Black Sea grain deal will be back on after today's meeting in Sochi. Let's not also forget another dangerous dimension. There have been a lot of Russian attacks on the seaport infrastructure of Ukraine, especially in the Odessa region. So that may be the only snag in getting the success we are looking for in this meeting between Putin and Erdogan later today. There's huge consequence. The prices of grain worldwide has risen, and if this is not quickly settled as we move into the winter months, there may be a lot of economic consequences for other parts of the world, and most nations that depend on Ukrainian grains for their survival.
Now, as this continues, we know that the humanitarian fallout is very dire. We've talked about the fallout to the ecosystem of Ukraine, but not many people are drawing attention to the fact that wildlife is being destroyed. Now, before you talk about wildlife, you talk about human life, and you talk about the emigration of people out of Ukraine, the crossings out of Ukraine to the surrounding nations. The United Nations says over 25 million people have left Ukraine because of this crisis. And Ukraine, in the meantime, is trying to conscript more people and have those men between the ages of 18, from 18 years of age upwards, to be drafted into the army. It seems as though the situation is getting more tense and the situation is getting more dire for the people living inside Ukraine. For the people who are in Ukraine, what do you think is the tact of President Zelensky as far as encouraging them that even though this war seems to continue, there will be light at the end of the tunnel? Because war weariness is a major factor that will affect both sides, and Putin and Zelensky have a responsibility to carry their people along. Even Putin, no matter how dictatorial he is or how hardline he is, he has a responsibility to try and make sure the people don't get tired of the war so as to not implode from within. The same as Zelensky. Who do you think is doing a better job? And do you think that that is the tack they'll need to take as this war continues to go on?
Yeah, if when you look at the war, obviously the Russians are the aggressors, and Ukraine is the nation at the receiving end. So I would say that it's the Ukrainians that are suffering more of the carnage and destruction. Even last night, the night before, like you mentioned in your report, there were a lot of drone attacks, firefights, over 557 shellings and all that. So Ukrainians are actually the one, under the cushion here. So, so we will expect that the Ukrainians have suffered more in this crisis. But also, there's also been questions of, low morale within the Russian army and all that. People, getting war weary, like you mentioned as well. So, it is like we said at the beginning of this conversation, the war is just at a stage of kind of a stalemate at the moment, and nobody is making headway. And hunger is just a whisker away the United Nations General Assembly. Let's hope that, a clever person from somewhere, will stop this carnage. There's been a lot of death and destruction, especially on the Ukrainian side, because the Russians are the ones attacking. So children, men and women, being killed, civilian areas being targeted. So there's been a lot of war crimes, especially from the Russian side of things, who are attacking Ukraine. So it's a very, very dire situation. And for the humanity in all of us, we just pray and hope that as the United Nations General Assembly comes up in New York this coming days, the Russia-Ukraine crisis will be top of the agenda. And somebody have to give way. Both sides have to meet each other halfway on the negotiation table.
Finally, you mentioned, and it's not the first time it's been said, that the United Nations appears as a toothless bulldog that barks more than it can bite. And it has been proven time and again over the years by wars that they could not intervene in nor stop or bring to some sort of conclusion. Now, from the days of Kofi Annan, now to Guterres, does the personality of the Secretary General of the United Nations come into play? Or are the instruments and the articles of the formation of this association, is that what is holding them back? The nations themselves who refuse to come under the umbrella of the United Nations when they see fit, such as Russia, eluding and disdaining everything that the Security Council said prior to the beginning of this war.
Yeah, the personality of the Secretary General does come in. Antonio Guterres is the man there now. Kofi Annan was there. We had the Egyptian Boutros Ghali at some point there. And then there was this other man from South Korea. These people had different personalities. That is part of it. But the major problem with the United Nations is, and you have just mentioned it, Olumide, is the national interest. Remember, during the invasion of Iraq, the United Nations, told the U.S. not to invade, but they eventually went because the U.S. was saying Iraq, they have weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons and all that, which were later found not to be the case. So then you have China there, you have Russia itself. This, especially the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, as it suits them, they flout United Nations guidelines and procedures. So the organization is just being drawn here and there, and they don't seem to have, any inkling of the exact thing to do. So it's a question of what we call vested interest. So in this Russia-Ukraine crisis, the US have a vested interest, Russia have a vested interest, China have a vested interest, and this, continue to play out. Germany, these superpower nations, they all have their interests. They are protecting their economic interests. They are protecting their ego. So all these things affect world peace. And I think that it is high time the UN, they look at their books, and then people have been calling for reform of that organization. I think it is high time that reform actually happens.
It's a very good thought, and it's one that we hope that all people take on board. Thank you for your contribution and insight this morning, Dr. Tony Agwens, Senior Lecturer, Anglo-Ruskin University in London, who joined us from there. Many thanks for being a part of the program.
Thank you, Olumide. Have a great day.
You too. After the break, the Deputy Chair of Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says Russia signs 280,000 for contract military service this year. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You are in the Soul for More stretch of today's special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov, saying the ministry needs new approaches as the war with Russia enters its 19th month. President Zelensky announced a plan to replace Mr. Reznikov on Sunday, in which the decision will be considered by the country's parliament. Explaining his decision, President Zelensky says the Defense Ministry needs a new approach and new formats of interaction with the military and society as a whole. He proposed Rustem Umerov, the current head of the State Property Fund of Ukraine, as a replacement. The Ukrainian president said Mr. Umerov was well known to the parliament and therefore did not require any further introduction. He added, "I expect the parliament to support this candidacy." Mr. Umerov, a Ukrainian businessman of Crimean Tatar origin, took the helm of the State Property Fund last fall. He had previously served as an advisor to the former chair of the so-called Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people, Mustafa Zhemilev. The organization had been outlawed in Russia since 2016 over extremist activities and links to other extremist and terrorist groups. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he struck a very important agreement on training Ukrainian pilots in France in conversations with President Emmanuel Macron. He did not elaborate on what training will be undertaken. France does not have the F-16 fighter jets Ukraine has recently been promised by Denmark and the Netherlands. It does have French-made warplanes and previous generation jets. In his nightly video address, Mr. Zelensky says he and Mr. Macron had also discussed what France could do to help protect the Ukrainian city and region of Odessa, critical to grain exports, but did not elaborate. The Ukrainian president also highlighted that 4 ships had passed through a temporary Black Sea shipping corridor established since Russia withdrew from a UN-backed grain export deal in July. Russia has blockaded Ukrainian ports since it invaded its neighbor in February 2022 and threatened to treat all vessels as potential military targets after pulling out of the UN-backed deal. The Deputy Chair of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says some 280,000 people have signed up so far this year for professional service with Russia's military. Medvedev, Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council, made the claim in a video posted on Telegram ahead of a meeting on military staffing with the heads of Russia's Far Eastern regions. Last year, Russia announced a plan to expand its combat personnel more than 30% to 1.5 million, an ambitious task made harder by its heavy but undisclosed casualties in Moscow's war against Ukraine. Some Russian lawmakers suggested Russia needs a professional army, 7 million strong, to ensure the country's security, a move that will require huge budget allowance. President Vladimir Putin ordered a partial mobilization of 300,000 reservists in September 2022, prompting hundreds of thousands of others to flee Russia to avoid being sent to fight. Mr. Putin says there is no need for any further mobilization. Now let's talk to Dr. Michael Ogu, Senior Lecturer, Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Babcock University. Thank you for being with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Olumide. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. If there was any country that ever knew anything about conscription and having a huge army, historically speaking, it'll be Russia. With the Red Army of the World War II, and all the previous wars that Russia has fought, it's not a new thing in Russia to have loads of people conscripted into the army and have that huge number. But now President Putin says that's not necessary at this point. They have the number advantage, but Ukraine has the numbers of its allies advantage behind it. And arguably that's the reason why they've been able to give Russia such a tough time, when some at the onset said it will be a no contest, including President Putin, which was maybe why he started this very hardy undertaking. At this point of the war, not for you to predict, but do you see a situation where both sides will have to continue to seek for men to add boots to the ground?
Yeah, thank you very much again for having me. You know, the war in Ukraine is one that has that continues to draw so many speculations, and for the two actors involved, being Zelensky and Putin, I think it's becoming a lot more difficult for them to to continue to prosecute this war. I mean, this war has gone way beyond what the two of them would have considered to be possible in the initial instance, because I'm not sure that they expected it to drag this long. So there have been so many contingencies, if I could use that word, that has come up now, that is making them to rethink their strategies, to reconsider certain things that they would have considered necessary in the initial start. So yes, I'm thinking that they will continue to recruit men. They will continue to struggle with soldiers that will help them to continue to prosecute this war. And of course, the two sides to continue to struggle and battle with several military casualties. I mean, we have seen the Russian side lose so many men, lose so many soldiers, as well as the Ukrainian side. And of course, they continue now to even recruit members from among migrants. So that is something that we might still continuing as the war continues to drag on. And I'm sure that it is only natural that they continue to seek men that will help them prosecute this war from whatever means they can get that done.
When the Black Sea grain deal expired, many were suspicious of the humanitarian corridor, the safe corridor that Ukraine said they were mustering so as to furnish passage along the borders of Ukraine, possibly hugging the borders of Poland and Bulgaria to excavate some goods. So one ship passed, 2 ships have passed, 3, now 4 have passed, and Russia hasn't so much as raised an eyebrow, militarily speaking, even though they had said that they are going to take action and see any vessel as fair game. What do you think Russia's end game is in allowing these ships to pass through that haven provided by, that corridor provided by Ukraine? Do you think they're going to attack them in the future? It's still just, we can only just speculate, But I was listening to your interview with Professor Tony, the last speaker, and you were talking about the meeting with the Russian and Turkish president today, and I'm thinking that Russia is just being strategic, with allowing these 4 ships pass so far, because of course Russia doesn't want to remain the black sheep, in this whole controversy. And it is my thinking too that Russia is trying to see they're basically trying to create an avenue where they can easily come back into the grain deal, because if they stay out of the grain deal for so long, they continue to lose, because the sanctions will continue and they will not be able to be in a position to secure any kind of deals for themselves, to ease the passing of their own ships and to ease export of their own products as well. So I'm thinking that they are just allowing these ships pass to create for them a kind of reason for coming back to the grain deal and to easily come back into that deal. Because if they do, it's obvious that they also have some they also have some benefit of being a part of the grain deal. So
I'm just thinking that this is just all a strategy that Russia has, to ease themselves back into the Green Deal, which of course the meeting today might actually be a very huge step forward in that direction.
Dr. Ogo, today is 556 days into the war. For those who, do you think that as long as it continues, who do you think will be the biggest loser? Or do we find a situation where nobody wins?
Well, that's a $1 million question, because as it stands now, it's really difficult to tell. Russia continues to stagger on, and Ukraine also is staggering on with the support of all the allies that they have, and of course the allies continue to insist, that the weapons that they are providing and the aid they are providing should be used only for defense for Ukraine. So the two sides are basically staggering, and it is difficult to say who is going to be the last man standing. All right, but it is obvious that we all want to see this conflict come to an end, and as much as Russia continues to insist, that they would continue to hold their ground, that Ukraine should not join the NATO and Ukraine should do all of that, and Ukraine also continues to insist. It is very sketchy to say now who is going to be the last man standing, and it's only possible that we can hope that they will come to a middle ground, where there will be no victor, no vanquish, because if a winner emerges, it has some consequences. It has some consequences for the future, because that would be, it could create an avenue where there'll continue to be some kind of inferiority complex between these two states going forward. So it is going to be nice if they come to an agreement where they can just resolve this conflict via negotiation, and there will be no winner or loser, that will arise from this.
Do you ever see Russia giving up Crimea? Now we know that there's been elections now in some of the areas occupied just recently by Russia in Ukraine, and it has gone as far as the educational institutions, where the Russians are rewriting the books to reflect the need to explain to the younger generation under the ages of 18 years of age why Ukraine was invaded and why they are not the aggressor and why Russia is defending itself. This is from Russia. So do you ever see, as part of concessions being made and that middle ground you spoke of being reached involving Russia actually agreeing to give up Crimea and any of the occupied territory?
The Crimean region already was a Russian territory before this invasion started. So I'm thinking that whatever concession or negotiation will be reached now will be one that will maintain the status quo before this invasion began. Because of course, like you have mentioned, it is almost impossible that Russia will give up Crimea and any other territories that they had already seized before this invasion began. But I'm just thinking that I'm thinking that negotiations are the best bet in ending this conflict without any future consequences. Because if a winner emerges, from my own thinking, there will be future consequences. For the loser, party, particularly. But I'm thinking that if a negotiation is a way to resolve, or if it's resolved via a negotiation, then of course we can see peace sustainable.
Dr. Michael Ogu, thank you so much for your contribution this morning on Russian invasion. We'll take a pause on the program. Please hold on as we turn our attention to Lagos State, southwest Nigeria, where at the moment history is said to be made as a first metro rail transport begins operations today. Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, is there for an inaugural journey on this first ride on the Lagos Blue Rail, completed now. and from Marina Lagos Island to Mile 2 in Lagos. We understand that Governor Sanwo-Olu is in Mile 2 right now. The images you're seeing are that of him at the Mile 2 axis of Lagos. Obviously, this is part of the inaugural ceremony of assuring Nigerians that Lagos is serious about revamping and revitalizing its urban mass transport. To that end, Blue Rail has been inaugurated, and it's happening from Marina to the inaugural ride to Mile 2 in Lagos mainland on the corridor towards the border with Benin Republic. So Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu is there with his entourage, security forces, top officials of the Lagos state government. This seems to be the facility that is the terminal in which, from which the Blue Rail operates. We know that railways have terminals of different sorts and shapes and sizes, and this one is for the particular facility in Lagos State. He's descending from the steps now, we understand, from what we can see, towards the rail line area in particular, surrounded obviously by his officials and people, members of the press and other onlookers who are present to see this inaugural ride of the Lagos Blue Rail. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu is entering the Blue Rail now, and for those who are familiar with railways around the world, train stations around the world, these seems to be par for the course, state-of-the-art facility that is going to help towards revamping and revitalizing Lagos urban mass transit.
So may I move to your cabin? Let them call me. The train is going to move soon. Guys.
You saw images from Lagos State, southwest Nigeria, Nigeria's commercial capital, of the inaugural journey of the Lagos Blue Rail involving the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, which is an epoch-making event in Lagos State. Stay with Channels Television for this story as it continues to develop. You're watching Russian invasion of Ukraine. Coming up, South Africa says inquiry found no evidence of arms shipments to Russia. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Finally, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says an inquiry into a U.S. allegation that a Russian ship had picked up weapons in South Africa late last year found no evidence the vessel had transported weapons to Russia. In claims that sparked a diplomatic row, the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Ruben Brigidi, told local journalists in a May briefing that Russian cargo ship Lady R had uploaded weapons at a naval base near Cape Town in December. The U.S. accusations raise questions over South Africa's professed stance of non-alignment and neutrality over Russia's war in Ukraine and concerns of possible Western sanctions. South African officials were quick to reject the claims, with the South African government launching an independent inquiry led by a retired judge.
Investigation, the panel found no evidence that any cargo of weapons was loaded for export onto the ship Lady R. The panel found that there was no evidence to support the claim that the ship transported weapons from South Africa destined for Russia. When all matters are considered, none of the allegations made about the supply of weapons to Russia have been proven to be true, and none of the persons who made these allegations could provide any evidence to support the claims that had been leveled against our country. To reveal the details of the equipment that was ordered and offloaded would compromise important military operations and put our soldiers' lives at risk. Under these circumstances, when lives would be at risk due to the revelation of the type of equipment that is utilized by our armed forces, the need for confidentiality is both necessary and justified.
Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. That's it on today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Thank you so much for watching.